Yo guys! It's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto what if tale. What if Naruto was the demon god and got Harem Moka Part 1 story? If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. The monster world, a dimensional world home to a races of monsters split from the human world by a dimensional barrier. It was created from the gods. Some say the gods created the monsters to test how life forms would adapt with powers. Some say they are freaks of nature. No one truly knows what was the true reason of the existence of the monsters. What is known, however, is that humans and monsters were in a never-ending war, each one wanting to exterminate the other. However, the dimensional barrier of the gods forbade it, so the majority of the monsters were secluded in their own world. Growing in power and knowledge, they formed organizations and positions of power, usually complemented by the power of a race. They created a monster ranking system, with the lowest being a rank and the highest S rank. In the entire world, only 4 known races have been accepted as the dreadful S ranks. First were the Yako were humanoid creatures the size of humans are taller, with intricate tattoo-like markings all over their body. They possess talls. The more talls a Yako had, the stronger it was. The strongest Yakos in history were mostly with 8 tails. They were rumored to have the blood of a kitsune because of their famed kitsunebi. The second race was the Phoenix. Phoenixes were large, majestic, fire-covered birds with glowing eyes and tremendous eyes. They had incredible power, as a fully charged blast of their fire were strong enough to bring down mountains. They were quite secluded in the peaks of volcanoes, coming down only for hunts and war or for occasions that have to do with the entire monster world. The strongest were the black phoenixes. The third race was the werewolf. Werewolves are human-looking beasts, though under the effect of a moon they transform into large wolves walking on 2 legs with incredible power and unmatched speed. The strongest a werewolf can go is under the effect of a full moon. The most powerful were wolves called alpha werewolves, however, are capable of transforming any time, though their strength does increase under the moon. Finally, they were the vampires. Vampires are human-like monsters of great beauty. They have red eyes and fangs to suck out blood. They possess monster strength, toughness, and huge reserves of yoki power. The energy of the monsters, they are considered the strongest monsters, with only werewolves able to match their combat prowess. Among them, the descendants of the Shinso were something like royalty. However, there once existed a race of 10 beings far greater than even the vampires, so terrifying, so strong that the monsters couldn't rank them as even SS rank, a title so rare that only a few Shinso vampires, alpha werewolves, 8-tailed Yoko, and black phoenixes were capable to reach They were called the Bigu. It was in the Dark Ages, the time of Alard, otherwise known as the oldest vampire. A few centuries before he was defeated by the 3 great Dark Lords, 10 beasts appeared in the world, so powerful that even Alard was weak against them. They took over the monster world by storm. Many great monsters attempting to defeat them, either for fame and fortune or to be rid of their threat. Only Alucard was capable of barely defeating their lowest in power. However, he suffered great injuries that didn't heal even during the time he was defeated by the Dark Lords. Their strength was so great that they were considered the royalty of monsters, godlike beings that crashed down to the earth, with their leader widely regarded as a god of monsters. All of the Bu were always in their large monster form to display their fearsome strength, except their leader, who didn't need to. The first of the Bigu resembled a tanuki. Its skin was a sandy brown color with dark blue markings running all over his body. He had a jagged mouth with no tongue. Its eyes had black sclera with yellower eyes and pupils resembling a 4-pointed star with 4 dots around it. It possessed 1 large spike tail. It was called the Achibi. The second Bigu resembled a Bakino. Its body was completely engulfed in azure flames. It had 2 different colored pupillas, eyes, 1 green and 1 yellow. It had 2 tails behind it, also in azure flames. It was called the Nebi. The third Badu resembled a turtle. It had a gray crike shell with spikes running all over his body except the belly. It had red muscled tissue with a pair of gray hands but no hind legs. Its face was covered by a spiked forehead and jaw with 1 red eye with yellow pupils. It had 3 shrimp black tails behind it. It was called the Sambi. The Fourth B resembled an ape. It had the body build of a gorilla with red fur and green skin. It had yellower eyes as with white pupils. Its face had elongated blunt fangs and two large horns in his forehead resembling a crown. It had four large tails with spike-like protrusions running along them. It was C. All the Yambi. The fifth B resembled a horse but with a head of S. Fur was white with tanned horns and hooves. It is dark blue-green eyes had red markings below them. It had five white tails and it was called the Goi. The sixth B resembled a large slug. It was white with a bluish tint. It was bipedal with small arms and feet. It had optical tentacles for eyes and holes for a mouth. His entire body from his head to his six tails was covered in a slimy substance. It was called the ruby. The seventh Badu resembled an armored kabashi. The armor blue and orange glow came from inside its helmet-like skull. It had spikes on its shoulders with a row of slits below them and six legs, three on each side. Its face had two pincers and two large horns. It had six tilak orange wings with an actual green tail. It was called the Nabi. The 8B resembled a new Xian with four large horns on his head. It had muscular upper body with spike protrusions on the elbows. It had straight teeth and pure white eyes. It had 8 octopus tails growing behind him using them as legs. It was called the Habi. The ninth Bigu was the biggest resembling a kitsune. It had red fur with the upper body resembling that of a human. Its eyes were red with slits. It had 9 enormous tails running behind it. It was called the QB master of the Yakos. The 10th Bu had a different appearance as it was always in its human form. It stood at 64 with a ripped frame fr. His hair was golden with black streaks running through it. He had blood red eyes with lit pupils similar to a wolf. His face was angular with a strong jaw and 3 dense whisker-like marks on each cheeks. He was wearing a dark gray robe concealing his entire figure. The black yoki aura with a red outline surrounded him with 2 wolf ears and 10 ethereal white tails with red outline behind him. He was called the Jui god of monsters. The monsters tried for a long time to bring down the Bigu, though each attempt failed as the Abi alone could take on an entire battalion of vampires. A lot of blood was spilled throughout the years, so they turned to sealing through the loss of many lives. He sealed 8B inside different isolated locations in the monster world powered by thousand seals and holy artifacts. The QB was sealed in another dimension as its power was too great to be contained in any location. The Jui escaped with little effort, swearing to free his brothers and sisters for hundreds of years. No one has seen him. The years passed and the tale of the royal monsters became a legend, with only the still alive survivors remembering the horrors of that war. But soon everything would change. The world would soon feel the power of the demon god Yakai Academy and the headmasters Ro. Om of Yakai Academy sat Tenmi Mami. He was one of the 3 Dark Lords, one of the most powerful demons of his age, and is known as the Exorcist as he wore clothes resembling a priest. He was sighing, dealing with paperwork. Suddenly he felt an enormous wave of pressure fall upon him, so strong that he fell to the floor in pure fear. He knew this aura, this terrifying power, this off-worldly energy. He was only a young demon back then, but he knew it. He looked up, pure terror in his eyes, and saw him. He stood in front of the closed door looking exactly the same as he did back then with his clothes. The only difference, he had his arms crossed and was looking down at him. It's been a long time, Tenmi Amy. My name is Shinju Naruto, but you can call me the Ju no Mi, he said in a tone of great power. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining and there was a calm breeze. A wind of change inside a bus next to a window stood Nudo, his arms supporting his face, a bored yet sharp look in his eyes. He was wearing black jeans, black boots, a black belt with a square golden buckle that had the letter N carved on it. For his torso he wore a blood-red muscle shirt that did little to hide his incredible build. A black leather jacket above it zipped halfway up. Hanging around his neck was a necklace with a pitch-black diamond. He was currently observing the countryside on his way to Yakai Academy with only him and the driver inside the bus. Here remembered his meeting with the headmaster. Flashback. Arudo Lu Ked down at Tenmi Mikagami, releasing his powerful pressure, slightly giving him the necessary room to breath and speak. Tenmio slightly panting as sweat formed on his face. His power isn't the same. No, I can tell even by this little amount it has grown stronger by leagues, he thought. Naruto looked at high I want to enroll in Yakai Academy as a student, he said, surprising Tenmi. And why would you want that, Naruto-sama, he said, only to fall back to the ground from a new burst of power. Naruto narrowed his eyes. That is for me to know, Dark Lord, he said with sarcasm. Also I refuse to wear that abominatio. And you call a uniform, he added, crossing his arms. Tenmi simply nodded. Naruto went to leave but stopped. He turned his head to him, his eyes glowing. If you speak to anyone about me, consider yourself booked for a trip straight to oblivion, he said, his tone filled with malice as all color left Ten's face. He disappeared in black smoke as the pressure was lifted. Tenmi gasped for breath. He painfully rose. Of all that could happen, this managed to happen. I thought. Flashback. And that train of thought was stopped as the bus came to a halt. The door opened and a teenager with black hair and brown eyes entered. He was wearing the male uniform of Yakai Academy students, which consisted of a white shirt with buttons, a red tie, and a green jacket with the school's emblem. He also wore brown pants and green loafers. He noticed only Nudo was inside the bus, but the blonde's red eyes and sharp look scared him, so he sat down 2 seats forward. Naruto sniffed the air and narrowed his eyes. What is a human doing in the school of monsters? Beats me though. If the kid passes the first lesson without any student realizing it, I will be impressed at him and disappointed at the males of the school, he said with a light smirk. He heard the bus driver talk to the boy. Hey, are you attending Yakai Academy? He asked as the boy nodded. Then be prepared, it is a scary school, he said as the boy raised an eyebrow but was interrupted by his phone. He picked it up and started chatting as Naruto went back to his thoughts. Yakai Academy. The bee stopped as the human first went outside, impaling at the surroundings. The bus driver smirked, though it disappeared with sweat forming on his face as Nudo slowly walked out of the bus. That kid's aura was so dark he felt like death was certain against him. He quickly drove away. Nudo tapped the boy Lee Ghtly on the shoulder, though the boy cringed as his strength, even at its lowest, was well over the strongest humans. Listen up, kid, be careful in this school, he said, walking ahead. Tizukun looked slightly scared. Rudo walked around observing the different decorations. He noted the blood river and shook his head. He suddenly heard a cry of look out and sighed. Raising his arm, he caught a female waist as a bike crashed on his shoulder only to get destroyed as if it hit a wall of cement. He looked at the girl as he placed her down. She had a fair face, long pink hair and emerald green eyes that gave her an exotic look. She had a curvy figure with cup-free and a firm rear. She was wearing the female outfit of Yakai Academy students, which consisted of the green jacket above a white shirt and a brown skirt with brown shoes. She blinked, then blushed lightly at the handsome blonde. She smiled. I am sorry, I am an emic, so I didn't watch where I was going, she said as he nodded. It is quite fine, he said. Then she noticed something. Blood flowed from his neck slightly, probably from the bike crash. Her blush deepened as the smell was intoxicating to her. She suddenly bit his neck, drinking his blood as he raised an eyebrow. She wet her eyes. That was the sweetest blood she had ever tasted. Full of energy, she licked the part where she bit him only to notice there was no wound. She raised an eyebrow as she was sure there was a scratch. She then widened her eyes, blushing. Sorry, I am a vampire and your blood seems so delicious, she said as he smirked. I told you it is fine, he said, picking up the bike from your attire. I assume you will be a freshman of Yakai Academy, he said as she nodded. She walked with him. That is right, are you as well, she asked, which he nodded. She looked at him, then looked to the ground. Could you be my friend? I don't know anyone here, she said as he looked at her. He smirked slightly. I thought we already were friends, he said as she glommed him with a smirk. Sighing, they went their way to the academy. They split once they arrived as the males and females were picking up their class schedules on different locations. Nudo was walking around trying to find class 103. He soon found it. Entering once inside, the females looked at him with blushes due to his face and look, while the boys looked at him in envy. He sat down to the corner of the class as the teacher, a woman with blonde hair and closed eyes, wearing an orange blouse below white shirt and a brown skirt, started the lesson. She smiled. Hello everyone, welcome to Yakai Academy. I am your room teacher Nekonim Shizuka, she said cheerfully. As you already know, this is a school for monsters, she said. Naruto felt the fear coming off Tukun, who was sitting in front of him and chuckled lowly. The world is under the occupation of the humans, so for us to survive we must learn to coexist with them, she explained. So rule number 1, never reveal your true form unless in certain situations. Rule number 2, no one should know of your true form. Remember He's rules, she exclaimed happily. The student huffed. What boring rules, we should just eat the humans, Sao said as tuning fear increased. Shizuka continued, for that reason any human will be killed on the spot, she said as T2-kun almost fainted. Suddenly the door opened as Moka entered. Sorry I am late, she said, then bowed with a smile. I am Akashi Moka, pleased to meet you, she exclaimed happily as the men gave her lecherous grins. She suddenly saw Naruto and squealed, rushing and gumping him to the hate of all guys in the room, effectively stopping the lesson. Always everyone looked at Moka walking the hall. Ays dragging Naruto by the hand, unconsciously placing it between her fists as both girls and boys send glares, the girls at Moka, the boys at Naruto. They went to a vending machine, Moka getting a tomato juice and Naruto coffee. Suddenly Seizu came and picked Naruto by his shirt, lifting him. What are you doing, Mochan, with a low life like him? Why don't you ditch him and act, he screamed as Naro broke his arm in 5 different spots with a single jab. Seizu held his arm in pain before Naruto flicked him on his forehead with his finger, sending him crashing into a wall. Naruto picked Moka and led her away. Moka and Naruto were sitting on the rooftop. Moka turned to him. Hey Naruto, what is your true form? She then put her hand in her mouth. Oh, I am sorry, we aren't allowed to reveal of true forms, she said. Naruto looked at her. Speak of true forms, you don't really look like a true vampire, he said as she showed him the rosary. It's because of this, if this is taken off I will turn into a scary vampire, that is why even I can't remove it, she said. A growl was heard as Moka blushed. She looked at Could I drink your blood, she asked as he revealed his neck. Squealing, she bit him, sucking his blood as she moaned to taste. He shook his head. She seems addicted, he thought. Suddenly the bell rang and they parted ways as now had different class. Courtyard. Naruto walked around the courtyard wondering where Moka was. His extra keen ears heard her scream as he teleported to her location. There she saw her below a tree, looking terrified at Sao, who was in his true form, a large muscular orc. He disappeared and flicked him to a tree. Seizu roared, stay away, she is mine, he roared as Naruto picked up Moka. Smirking, he took off her rario. To her surprise, as a large wave of yaki surrounded the area as Sao looked scared. Naruto looked at his new appearance with interest. She stood slightly taller with a curvier body, wider hips and larger free going to D-cup. Her eyes were blood red and her hair silver white. She looked at Naruto then smirked at Sao. So you're the one who awakened me, she asked as Sao was Bling silver hair, red eyes, terrifying power. This is an S-class monster, a vampire, he said as she smirked, stretching. Sao's body was trembling. Then he growled, it doesn't matter if you're a vampire, I will beat you, he said. She yawned then looked at him. Know your place, she said, kicking him into a rock. As he fell unconscious, she turned to Naruto, approaching him, her hands in her hips, a seductive sway of her hips in her movement. She looked to my sense of great power within you, power far greater than even my father, a being beyond S-class. What are you? She spoke with great interest. He smirked as he ached her. Something worth discovering on your own, he said as she smirked. She bit his neck, savoring the taste of his blood. She looked at him. I look forward to figuring you out, Naruto, she said as he placed the rario back on before she disappeared. She said, take care of outer Moka. As Moka turned back to her normal form, unconscious, Naruto looked at her, sighing. He picked her up bridal style as he was making his way back school. He thought things might get interesting before I start my plan. Yakai Academy. The week had passed since Naruto's arrival to Yakai Academy. So far everything was peaceful. Naruto enjoyed it slightly, as for quite a while he didn't have a chance to relax. He passed the days with Moka, who was clinging to him and drinking his blood whenever she could. He didn't mind as she seemed to enjoy it. Besides, his blood regenerated almost instantly after the wound was closed, so it wasn't like he was hurt. Well, at the same time it wasn't like he would turn into a vampire. His powers were too great for that, and from her continuous drinking she didn't seem to suffer any effects either, so everything was cool. He enjoyed Moka as her hyperactivity and fun nature eased up his own strict Nature lesson had ended a few minutes ago and he had to use the bathroom, so Moka went out her way to the courtyard. He was looking for her when she heard her shout his name. He turned and narrowed his eyes slightly. She was sitting on a bench with an awkward feeling Tuku next to her as Moka held his arm. He approached him slowly as Moka hugged him. All the while he was looking at T-Sukun, who was gulping. She let go of him and gestured at T-Sukun. Narun, this is T-Tukun Kunin, a new friend of mine. Could you please be friends with him? She asked him, smiling cutely. Naruto turned to Tukun. He looked at for a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity to T-Tukan, and raised his arm slowly. T-Tukan shook it only to close his eyes in pain as Naruto's supernatural strength made his arm dark red. Naruto let go and placed an arm on Sukun. Mission, can you please wait here? Me and T-Sukun must have a man conversation. I promise not to hurt him, he said to ease her worried look. He took Sukun a few feet away out of Moka's ear reach, then turned to him crossing his arms. Tell me, why did you want to be friends with Moka? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Sukun gulped, seeing Nut's blood-red slitted eyes appearing as they could pierce his soul. She is the most friendly person in our class, he stuttered. Baruto continued, does it have anything to do with her beauty, physical or mental? Sukun shook his head. No, I just want to be her friend cause she seems like a nice person, he admitted. Nudo looked at him for a minute. Osun's growing anxiousness, then nodded. Naruto outstretched his arm to the right, palm facing upwards, as to Tukun's surprise a hole appeared above his arm in the air. A pair of greenish-black Nanaku fell down. He threw them at Sukun along with a scroll. If you are to be Moka's friend, not to mention live in a monster school, you should gain some powers. Those Ninu are sentient. The more you train with them and bond with them, the stronger you will become. The scroll contains a training schedule and an Inaka-style get to work when you got free time, he said as he left, then stopped. He turned to him. Tell Moka, I have some work to do, he added, going his own way as Tukun nodded with surprise and walked back to Moka. I should have given this to that philosophy teacher before I went to Moka, he thought, holding an envelope. Shizuka asked him to give this to that teacher before he left class and he accepted. He had to go to the bathroom, then went to find Moka and he forgot. He remembered it later on. As he was walking, he heard a cry of help. He turned, seeing a girl on her knees next to a large root of a tree. He observed her with slight interest as she looked at him. She had light blue hair tied with a RPLE headband and her eyes were purple. She had a curvy figure with huge fests reaching an H-cup. She didn't wear the school's uniform, instead wearing a long-sleeved white shirt with a red bow tie with a yellow vest above that. She also had a brown check skirt and white shoes. He raised her to her feet. As she pressed her free at his chest, getting a raised eyebrow, she smiled. Thank you for helping me, she said. Then she changed her smile to a seductive one. Will you be mine, Naruto, she asked, her eyes glowing slightly. Naruto felt a sudden attempt to invade his head and dispel the illusion. He pushed her back as she yelped and fell on her back. He looked at her with narrowed eyes. If you ever attempt to try and hypnotize me again, you will regret it, he threatened before living. Kumu looked shocked, then narrowed her eyes, clenching her teeth. Moka was drinking some tomato juice when Kumu roached her hate-filled eyes. It's all your fault, Akashi Moka, she accused, pointing at her. A crowd gathered with the boys whistling and drooling at Kumu. Massive fests. Moka took a step back in surprise and blinked. What did I do, she asked. She growled, don't play innocent, you are in the way of my grand plan, she said as Moka looked confused. My plan is to turn all the males in Yakai Academy into my love slaves. Yes, the flawless plan of the succubus Kurumu Korano, she shouted with many of the boys nodding, not minding to be her slave. Moka raised an eyebrow, sweat dropping at the planum. Isn't it against the rules to reveal your true form, she asked. However, all the boys fall for you, she said, fire appearing in her eyes. I won't lose to you, she yelled as sparks blew from the girls' eyes. The boys had stars in their eyes. Catfight, they yelled. What ensued was the hottest catfight the school males had ever seen as the two girls bit, pulled and slapped everywhere they could. Kumu was pulling on Moka's hair as she scratched her arms while Moka was biting her shoulder, clawing her stomach. Suddenly Kumu kneed the rather combat inexperienced outer Moka in her stomach as she gasped for air. Kumu reared her arm back going to slap her, however a hand grabbed her wrist in mid-attack. Everyone gasped as Naruto appeared out of thin air and grabbed her arm. He looked at the two women. What is going on here, he asked. Gumu leaned to him, then pointed at Moka. She started it, she said, then tried her strongest illusion on him. Please punish her, Naruto __. She purred seductively. However Naruto narrowed his eyes. He pushed her to the ground, causing her to gasp. He turned to Moka. What happened, Moka, he asked. She pointed at Kumu. She said, I am in her way to turn all boys in school into slaves. As Kumu growled, why do you see? Or it is you who keep him as a food source, she accused, with Moka widening her eyes. Tears formed in her eyes as she attempted to run off. However she fell on the chest of someone. She looked up only to see another Nudo. Suddenly an ominous aura was felt. All the students reared back as Nudo looked anger. Why, he towered over Kumu as she felt like an ant in front of a lion. He growled, it was my decision to allow her to drink my blood and I support it fully. Now you heard my friend, apologize or face the consequences, he growled as Kumu down. She muttered something only for Nero to say louder. She mumbled an apology as Nudo nodded. He turned and grabbed Moka as the clone dispelled and both of them left the building. Forest. Nudo was walking around the forest trying to console a sad Moka. Suddenly he turned Moka, slowly following his action. There stood Kurumu with a strong look in her face. Naruto raised an eyebrow as she transformed into her true form. Two demonic wings grew from her back, a demonic tail from her rear, and her nails turned to large claws. She narrowed her eyes. I challenge you, Moka Akashia, for the ride of Naruto, she yelled, charging. Naruto smirked as he took off in one swift move. The Riri as a column of Yaki rose, with Kumu stopping midway. Fear in her eyes. Inner Moka was revealed, looking at Kumu with an arrogant smirk. Sweat formed on Kumu face. Is this a vampire's true form, a true S-ranked monster, she said out loud, with Moka disappearing and appearing in front of her. Your body will determine the rumors, little succubus, she said as Kumu attempted to slice her. She dodged the strikes and grabbed her tail, raising her to the air. Learn your place, she said, kicking her through 3 trees before she slammed and bounced off a thick log. She looked up terrified as Moka raised her leg in an axe kick, attempting to break her. However Naruto appeared and caught her leg effortlessly. To her surprise she narrowed her eyes at him. Why, she asked as Naruto turned to Kumu. You do this to find your destined one, he asked as Kumu widened her eyes, then nodded beside and let go of mock. Your destined one will be a man you truly love, capturing boys won't bring you near, he finished. He then turned to Moka. She isn't worth killing, he said as she frowned but understood. He placed the Rario back as she said, take care of outer Moka. Then she fell unconscious as the pressure dissipated. Kurumu also fell unconscious. Naruto sighed, making a clone. The real one picked up Moka, the clone picked up Kurumu, and they both went to the infirmary. Next day Nudo woke up from his alarm clock, smashing it to bits with a punch. He opened his eyes, blinked in annoyance, then picked up a new clock. He rose with a yawn and went to the bathroom. Unlike most dorms, his had a bathroom inside, so he didn't have to use the men's bathroom. He did all of his morning activities before dressing and escaping his room. He had nothing to do for a while as school didn't start in an hour. He merely went to a vending machine and picked up coffee. He stood outside the men's bathroom, leaning on the wall and taking a few sips. From time to time he observed as the male students rushed to finish their activities quickly. A few of them were complaining because they turned in their true form in the middle of the night. He shook his head as it showed they didn't have control over their power. He noticed Sukun coming out of the bathroom. Sukun saw Naruto and waved, with Naruto nodding at him. Get dressed up, he said, turning back to the students. Sukun nodded and in 10 minutes he returned in his school uniform. They walked towards the academy. The dorms were in separate buildings. They saw a large whiteboard outside as Sukun sighed. This is what I thought. I forgot the results came out, he said looking at his score and seeing he was 124th. He sighed, then turned to Naruto. What score did you get, Nudo-san, he asked as Naruto pointed. He looked at the direction only to widen as he was ranked first with a flawless score and extra points for his pinpoint detailed answers. He looked down as Naruto huffed. Don't let it get in your head. For your condition you did very well, unlike some others, he said, addressing 3 goblins who were cheering. They OT to the 200 ranks. It sickened him that they were proud of that, but he chose to pay a little attention. Suddenly he turned his attention to cheers. Moka was walking towards them as all boys cheered her. She smiled, rushing and gumping Nudo. Hey Nutun hi Tukun Kunin. She greeted them as they nodded with smiles. T. Sukun looked at the board and gasped, Moka Senor Fifth, he exclaimed as she nodded, frowning. I am 124th, he mumbled as she smiled. I am sure if you try harder you will reach the 80th seats next time, she said, lifting Tukun's spirits. She turned to Naruto, grinning, and you Naruto, you reached F. IRST place. Congratulations, she yelled as he shook his head with a smirk. It was nothing, he exclaimed. However, all three of them turned as they heard commotion. They looked to see three students surrounding a small girl. She was quite short and wore a witch outfit, revealing what her true form was. She was looking with slight fear at an older boy. He smirked at her. Congratulations Yari Sendo, you got ranked second, but it is expected of a girl with your level of intelligence. You didn't skip grades for nothing. However, he said, narrowing his eyes, don't get beepy. She looked at him holding her pink heart shape Ed with a blue 5-pointed star inside. Onin beep, she asked. He pointed at her outfit. Your attire looks like cosplay and it goes against the school's dressing code, he said, holding his head seriously. You give me headaches. Yukari looked down as she moved her one behind her back. Suddenly 3 baskets fell on their heads as they crashed to the ground. With her smiling, they growled, extending their claws. While you little, the class representative said. However, he was forced to stop as Moka appeared midway. Please stop, don't use violence against girls, she begged as the representative growled, stay out of the way, he yelled, attempting to hit her. However, Naruto appeared and grabbed his wrist. The representative looked in fear as he knew Naruto was considered by many the strongest student, having taken down Sao with one flick of his finger along with many bullies. He then looked at the pink-haired girl and realized she was his friend and he was known to be protective of her. He was screwed. Naruto broke his wrist before he flicked him on the forehead, sending him crashing on a tree. He disappeared, chopping another's neck, dropping him to the ground before he looked at the last one and sent him flying into a wall with a small flare of yaki. The students looked in awe as Naruto dusted his hands and turned to Mu. All right, he asked as she nodded with a smile and a blush. They turned, noticing Yukari, Moka, and T. Sukun moved in the cafeteria as they talked with Yukari. Naruto was having a talk with the head master. They were discussing about Yukari's smartness as she was blushing. No, it's not. Moka-san is much more beautiful. In fact, I love you, Moka-san, she yelled, jumping Moka and fondling her as Tukun was holding the blood coming from his nose. Please go out with me, she said as Moka blushed. Only it's his friends, she said, getting a squeal from Yukari. Aono looked scared. If Nudo finds out, he thought, pushing the thoughts of the scary blonde aside as he kept looking at them. Then the hallways, everyone had blushes on their faces as a red Moka was walking the hallways with T-Tuku next to her and Yukari behind her, fondling her. Free swam Mokan, your fests are so big, mine are, she yelled as she was lifted. They turned, seeing it twitching. Nudo dropping Yukari to the floor. What is wrong, he asked as she glared at him. So you're here, Nudo, top ranks, great athletic skills, you're the typic Al golden boy, you're not worthy of Mochin, she said, waving her wand. Suddenly brooms flew towards Naruto, only for Naruto to disappear and reappear before Yukari. With a swift move, he took Yukari's staff and bonked her on the head with it. He dropped it back. Be polite, you won't make friends like that, he saw it as she smiled, like I would want to make friends with lower life forms. Besides, I was always alone, she said before casting a spell that blinded the hallway. As she smiled and escaped, he looked at her retreating form with narrowed eyes. Suddenly Kumu rushed at them. I heard Moka got a new girlfriend. I wanted to congratulate, she said as Moka raised an eyebrow. Why is that, she asked. Kumu smirked so that Naruto is all mine, she exclaimed with Moka gasping. No, stay away from Nudo she said as she shook her head. No way, he is my destined one, she said as the trio raised an eyebrow. Desti Ned one Gumu Ned, he stood up to me, so he is my destined one, she said as they argued. Naruto narrowed his eyes. He approached Sukun and whispered to his ear, take care of those two, he said as he disappeared. Sukun raised an eyebrow but nonetheless nodded, observing their heated argument. Swamp Naruto appear Ed in a swamp outside the school. He looked around before he heard a scream. He teleported to a spot, noticing Yukari her back on a tree as three lizard men attacked her. Naruto appeared in front of her, throwing a jab at a lizard man's head, piercing through and killing him. He then flicked one's neck, breaking the bones. He did both attacks in the blink of an eye. The lizard man was leaning backwards in fear as Yukari looked at Naruto with widened eyes. Naruto turned to the last lizard man who attempted to run, but Naruto kicked a branch at him, the branch piercing his heart, killing him instantly. He turned back to her. She gaped at him, then frowned and huffed. I could have taken care of them myself, she said, only to get a jab in the head. Moaning from the pain, she rubbed her neck as Naruto kneeled towards her level. You're not alone, he said, freezing her. I know how you feel. I understand the feeling of loneliness. I once had a family, but they got sent off to some faraway place, so I was alone for a while, but here I made a few friends and I am no longer alone. Same as you, I am your friend, and so is Moka and Sukun, even Kumu, he said as tears formed in her eyes. You're my friends, she asked as he nodded. Tears flowed freely as she cried on his shoulder. He patted her head, staying there for a few minutes. Class inside class 103, Moka, Kurumu, Yukari and Sukun were all talking with Naruto leaning on a wall and observing. Once they returned, Yukari apologized for her behavior towards her classmates as they forgave and apologized for their own treating. Everything seemed back to normal. However, in Nut's mind, he knew more madness would follow with him being in the middle. It was troublesome. Yakai Academy. It was a beautiful day in Yakai Academy. The sun was shining brightly, the wind was blowing gently, and now Anyo their point in Naruto was as powerful as ever. The day was a soccer tournament. All the girls and the non-participating boys were standing on the side cheering for whichever team they supported. Among them was Moka cheering for Naruto. On the football field stood two teams, one wearing black, the other wearing white. Leading the black team and being their striker was Naruto, with a second striker being Toucan B. Naruto was not interested in any sport. He knew how to play, and with Moka pleading him using her puppy face, he decided to enter the tournament, and since he was a good guy, he forced Sukun to add he was currently passing through each defender with ease, like they didn't even exist. The moment he had a clear shot, he reared his leg back and kicked the ball, sending it directly at the goalkeeper's stomach, driving him to the net and tearing it along with bringing the entire goal down. Cheers Europe. Ted as he run his fingers along his hair. With a smirk, he nodded to some of his teammates, then changed to his normal attire for class. Everyone, let us join a club, said Shizuka as she got raised eyebrows from everyone, including Naruto. The purpose of this school is to teach demons to adapt in human society. Eddie, that is why we must get a deeper understanding of them by working in their society and coming to contact with their art, she explained as Naruto nodded slowly, then went back to twirling his pen from boredom. Our purpose is to appear exactly like humans, so that is why everyone must be adamant about keeping their true form a secret, she finished as a student raised his arm, then pointed at her tail as the class erupted to snickers when Shizuka scratched him. As soon as the bell rung, each student rushed out, gathering to the spot where all the clubs were introduced. Moka was holding Nutke arm and GGing him to each club as he shook his head in amusement due to her excitement. They passed many clubs, none of them interesting or enjoyable, from a mummy club to a chemistry one. Eventually they saw a place where a large part of the male population stood drooling. Naro turned there as he observed it. Its leader was a woman with turquoise hair and yellow eyes. She was wearing a purple bikini with a purple towel around her waist. She smiled at the gathered men, taking special notice of Naruto. My name is Tam Inus, please swim with us, she said cutely as the man nodded happily. All members are currently Wome. Any man who joins shall have special services by the women, she continued, blowing a kiss at Naruto to mke his anger. Please join the club, she said, finishing as many men started signing up. Theo turned to Moka. I know you cannot swim, but how about we just stay near the pool and observe them? It might be fun seeing the poor boys learning to swim, he said as she nodded, happy that he didn't join because of her. They stood to the sidelines of the pool watching as each member was trying to learn how to swim, all the while admiring the girls teaching them. Amma walked towards him. Why don't you come and SWI With as she asked with a pout. He turned. My friend doesn't feel like swimming, he said. She smiled. Oh, come and swim just for 5 minutes, she said cutely. Nudo turned to Moka. Do you mind for 5 minutes, he asked as she shook her head. Though a look of jealousy was on her face, he nodded, taking off his vest and shirt as Moka and Tamal blushed furiously at his body. He then took down his jeans, revealing black swim trunks with crimson flames. He jumped inside the water, sighing slightly. However, as soon as he did, two blurs dived in, raising water and almost hitting Moka. From the spots came Kurumu in a yellow bikini and Yukari in a black swimsuit. B grabbed each of his arms, trying to bring him to their sides. This kept going for 5 minutes until Nudo disappeared. He reappeared to the edge of the pool, going to get outside when he felt two soft orbs in his back. Tamama appeared behind him. And where do you you're going, she said seductively as Naruto wasn't affected. 5 minutes pasted, he said, then looked down, seeing an orange tail. I am sorry, but once you enter there is no way out, she said as her teeth became fangs and tried to bite him. He leaned to the side, pushing her to the middle of the pool as Kuruma manifested her wings, bringing her and Yukari out of the water. All the women turned like that, attacking the poor boys who were trying their best to escape. Naro frowned. They are mermaids, he said, then turned to Kurumu and Yukari. Get them out, he said. As they did so, Kurumu dived in and started grabbing men, throwing them out of the water as Yukari used her wand to levitate them. Naruto stood inside the water as all the mermaids surrounded him. What will you do now? We're invincible in the water, one yelled as Nudo smirked. Suddenly they all cried out in pain as black lightning erupted from Nito's bod. Why electrocuting them badly but not killing them, dropping them unconscious. He came out to the shocked looks of Kumu, Yukari and Moka. He looked at her, frowning as water seemed to have hit her when the men escaped, or when the lightning formed ripples. He grabbed her. We need to get her to the infirmary, he said as he teleported away. Kumu and Yukari groaned, taking the long route. 3 hours had passed in the infirmary as Moka was sound asleep. Nudo was sitting in a chair while Kumu and Yukari were arguing about who was better for him, Mucha or Kumu. He paid them little mind as he was thinking of what to do. Oh, with a bigu, even if we thousands of miles away, I can still feel their presence. Locating them is easy, but from who to start? I must first get out one of the strongest. That leaves me with Nabi, hubby, and QQ. He started thinking of their abilities. Nabi was a master of wind, earth, and lightning. Could used different forms of dust and had control over all insects. Their best ability though was her crystal manipulation, allowing her to form different crystals, including her special blinding ones, which were faster than the naked eye could track. However, she was weak at powerful fire and water manipula. While her crystals were weak against lightning. Finally, she was a bit overconfident, taking pride in her air abilities. The chibi was incredibly strong with large durability. He was a master of earth, lightning and water manipulation, along with having control over all aquatic life forms. However, his greatest ability was his ink manipulation, allowing him to use ink as a weapon, mixing it with attacks to boost power. Mixed with his hand-to-hand combat skills, the best of any Badu below him. Close range was his domain. However, he is weak to earth and lightning due to his primarily water skills, and his NK is weak against fire. Also, he is quite slow, with only the Risi being slower. Finally, he wasn't very sharp. Then there was Q. She had the best physical abilities, her strength and speed the strongest out of the 9. She was a master of wind and fire manipulation, not to mention illusions. Finally, she was unpredictable. However, she was weak against consecutive attacks and sealing abilities. He thought for a while and nodded to himself. I will come for you soon, Kurarama. Do he was interrupted as Moka woke up. She opened her eyes and clinged on Naruto with a yell as Kumu and Yukari glared daggers at her. Naruto laughed and petted Mucha's head as she looked at him with a puppy face. Knowing what she wanted, he showed her his neck, to which she immediately bit on. She moaned at the sweet taste of his blood, as with each taste she was becoming addicted. Once she finished, Kumu pushed her back and hugged Nudo, planting her free in his face. However, Moka tried to push her away. A fight broke out with Yukari in the middle. He shook his head and left them to their antics. Next day. Today was an uneventful day. However, Nudo knew there never was an uneventful day. As soon as the bell rang and students started leaving Shizuka approached Naruto. Have you joined a club? She asked as he shook his head. She smiled. How about joining the newspaper club? To which he shrugged. Moka, Rumu and Yukari popped up. We're joining, I yelled simultaneously as Shizuka cheered. Naruto turned to Tukun as he nodded with a smile. I am joining too, he said with Shizuka looking excited. Great, 5 people meet me here in an hour, she said as they nodded and left for lunch. Nudo and the rest were sitting in the cafeteria. Nudo was in a rather peculiar situation as Kumu was feeding him pudding, not that he minded, while Moka was glaring at her. Kurumu smirked in victory when he ate all her pudding. Yukari and T-Sukun were eating their mashed potatoes. Naruto was drinking his juice when Moka looked at him cutely. Can I have lunch? Naruto she asked as he smiled and showed his neck. Moka squealed and clinged on him, biting his neck. She moaned instantly at the scent and taste of his blood. As her senses were clouded, she unconsciously sat on his lap and started grinding herself on him to the surprise of the students and Kumu. Increasing anger, Dudo raised an eyebrow as he didn't expect the innocent Moka to do something so arusi. He felt his hidden power steering as his instincts started to getting wild with her actions. He pushed them down, however, as he didn't want to go ballistic inside the cafeteria. After she finished, she licked his blood then hugged him with a content smile. All the while Kumu was trying to get her off Yuto. Yep, never an uneventful day. After lunch they sat in front of Shizuka as she smiled, showing them a newspaper. All right, let us start the Yakai Academy newspaper club's activity now, she said, but before she could finish a knock on the door was heard. Inside came a man with reddish brown eyes and black hair kept back by a red headband. He wore the male uniform without a tie, leaving his shirt open to show a wolf pendant. He was holding 3 bouquets of roses, smiling. Nice to meet you, I am Moroka-Jan, but please call me Jin from now on, he said as he gave each girl a baro as fit beautiful girls. He added once he said that something inside Nudo told him to make him his servant, teaching him to stay off his girls, but he put the feeling down as they weren't even his yet. Shizuka smiled. Jin is the only second member. Well, there are no third-year members, feel free to ask him anything, she exclaimed. Jin nodding. You can count on me, he said with a grin. Ashizuka left. The members sat around in a table as Jin started talking. Now let me explain the club to you guys. The main purpose of the club is to distribute the school newspaper, report any happenings in the school and write them on the newspaper. For the sake of reporting we must put ourselves in danger to acquire information, he said as Moka whispered to Kurumu. He seems reliable. With Naruto snort. Just kidding, please don't be tense and let us get along, he said. Anything we may research, he asked as T-Sukun and the girls started thinking. Will Nudo looked at Jin. Compared to most boys here, he has a pretty strong aura, he thought. Suddenly Kumu spoke. There are rumors a man is peeping girls and he is so fast he hasn't been caught. We can investigate that, she said as the girls nodded. Due to the hatred for perverts, Jin nodded. If we are to do we must first find information, he said as Tukun asked how we must search around for intel and ask the people, he said. Jin was currently observing Moka and Kurumu trying to place posters up while Naruto, Sukun and Yukari were making them raise them higher, said JY as Moka and Kuruma yelled higher. Hey asked as he nodded. Yes, much higher, he said with a grin. He kneeled looking below their skirts until he felt a strong pressure coming from behind. He turned seeing Nudo looking at him. You were looking at their skirts, right, he asked as Jin acted innocent. Nonsense, you think I am someone who he was in. Interrupted as Nudo whistled. Girl, as he was peeking at your panties, he said as they screamed and started beating him up. Sukun's sweat dropped as Naruto turned to him. How do your nunchukas go, he asked as he smiled. Great, I can feel my strength increasing, he said as Naruto nodded. Next day, hey Naruto-san, JY said approaching him. Naruto turned to him. He smiled. Come with me, I found intel on a place we need to investigate, he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow but followed him nonetheless. Jin guided him to a part of the school where a small window was. Jin pointed at it while taking out his camera. Go take a look. Okay, he said. Naruto smirked. You think I don't know that is the girls' changing room, he asked as Jin sweat swiftly. He kicked Jin's legs, dropping him down while breaking the camera. There's a peeping Tamong, he yelled, disappearing. The girl screamed and in a few seconds they got to Jin's spot and started Eating him up, Jin growled during the beating. You will pay Nudo tonight on the full moon. Moka will be mine. He thought it was night time as Moka was walking to her dorm. However, she turned into a corner only to spot Jin. He smiled at her. Hey Moka-chan, can you come with me? He asked as she nodded with a smile. They went on the roof, the full moon shining brightly. Jin looked at it. The moon is beautiful tonight, Dai said as Moka nodded. However, she gasped as Jin hugged her. Let us be one, Moka-chan, he said as she screamed and pushed him back. JY frowned. If you will resist, then I shall force you, he said. He roared, lightning surrounding him. His muscles became bigger as silver fur covered him. His head turned into a wolf's as his nails turned into claws while his shirt and jacket were ripped off. He roared as Moka fell back with a scream. He jumped into the air, rearing his hand back. You shall be mine, Akashi Yoka, he roared as she closed her eyes. The sound of flesh hitting flesh was heard, but Moka opened her eyes. She saw Nudo holding one finger up, blocking his punch entirely. He smirked, flicking him on the head and sending him to the other side. Well, Sukun, Kurumu and Yukara Ed in their true forms. Il Sukun had his nin shaku out. Naruto stopped them with a look, then he raised Moka to her feet and placed her near them. He turned to Jin, who roared, you're in the way, he said. Naruto closed his eyes then opened them as an immense pressure fell around them. He raised his arm. Be honored, it has been a long time since I is this, he said as black flames appeared on his palm. When they disappeared, an enormous grates were appeared. It was 6 feet tall, slightly smaller than Nudo himself. It had a handle made of black wood with a pommel of iron holding a black diamond. The guard was actually a black wolf's head with rubies. His eyes, from its moss came the blade made of black metal with both edges colored red. It had writing in an unknown language in the base of the blade, glowing with a red light. He swung it around. Behold, Akami no Sinu, the wolf of war, he said. Jin started to sweat at Naruto's increasing aura while Yukari and T-Sukun were panting. Moka and Kumu were sweating while huge blushes formed on their faces. They were holding their skirts down as their legs were closed with pressure from inside Moka's Rosario. Inner Moka was panting as she felt his immense power and her body was responding to the feeling of a true alpha. That's it. If outer doesn't let him claim her soon, I shall force her to, she thought. Naruto placed a sword on his shoulder, smirking a chin. Jin roared and charged at him. His hand reared back. He instantly swung his sword, muttering, vacuum sword. What happened next surprised everyone as a blade of wind came out of the sword, cutting diagonally his chest, blood flowing. Well roared in pain. He did the same technique, making an X, then pointed his finger at him. A beam came out and blasted him, forming light. When it cleared, Jin had turned back to his normal form, unconscious, and leading Narc sword disappeared as a clone was formed, picked up Jin and took him to the infirmary. The real Nudo turned to the group, smirking at their flushed faces only for them to blush harder. He also smelled their honey and felt their fragrance. He shrugged them off as it wasn't time yet. He looked up. It's late, we shall meet tomorrow, he said as they nodded and each went their separate ways, albeit the girls looked at his back for a few moments before leaving. Next day, Nudo was sitting in classroom ignoring one of Shizuka's boring lessons. He was looking outside the window thinking about morning's events. They had placed posters with proof Jin was the pervert. When the girls asked him where he got the photos, he smirked and said it was a secret. The fact he saw JY Chaz by girls proved that in reality he was a blood clone. The real one had gone to Kurum Seal. It would take him a day to return, so it was up to him to take his place. He was fitted with extra power to regenerate blood quick enough for Moka. He heard the ring inside. Shizuka closed her book. That is all for today. However, I have an announcement to make. In a week from now, a tournament shall take place. BU males are prompted to attend. FEMA less are welcome as well. The winner shall be called Yakai Academy's champion, its strongest monster. Also, the winner will have a choice between 3 prizes. I hope you all attend. She finished leaving the class. The students murmured amongst themselves. Naruto rubbed his chin thinking about what Shizuka saw. A tournament sounded fun. Well, there would be no one who could entertain him. The prize sounded as something appealing. He turned when Kumu jumped him. You should totally attend. Nudo __, she said before Moka pushed her aside and nodded. Indeed you should. Nudo __, she said as they both started Glaring at each other, Nudo laughed and rose. All right, I am going. You guys go to the cafeteria. I will join you, he said as they nodded. Nudo wrote his name in a sheet of paper where all the participants wrote their names for the tournament. He heard a cough and turned, seeing Tamao. She was wearing the stud Ent's uniform and was looking down. He raised an eyebrow as she took a breath. She looked at him. I am sorry I tried to suck your life energy, she said as he shook his head and went back to seeing the participants. It is nothing, he said as she blushed. I have something to say, she said as he turned. She took a deep breath, then said with a large blush, I love you. With closed eyes she opened them. When he heard chuckling, she looked at her with a smile. Is that so, he asked as she nodded. He cracked his neck. I am not ready for a relationship. If you can wait a month or so, that can change, he said with a wink. As she glowed from happiness. He waved his hand. Going back to class, when she called his name she bowed. I shall root for you, she said as he nodded with a smirk and went his way. Unknown location. Barrow looked at a large cliff. He was in a mountain surrounded by a forest. The cliff in front of him was streetly spiked, however one part was flat. He looked at it and felt the powerful seal's place there. He also felt her aura. Kurarama was there. He raised his arm and sent a pulse of his powerful yaki at the seal dimension. Inside the seal was another dimension. It was always night with yellow grass everywhere. Here the eye could see only a large rock stood with an opening inside. Laid Kurama in her nine-tailed fox form. Although much smaller, she was currently sleeping as she had nothing better to do. The first century she was sealed here. She tried using her potent yaki to break the seal, though she only managed to weaken it slightly. Eventually she gave up and spent the rest of her days sleeping and blasting the barrier. She couldn't train as she was only a spirit, her body connected to the seal. Once the seal broke, her body would appear and she would be connected to it again, though it wouldn't seem to happen any time soon. However, she suddenly felt trembling. She opened her eyes and widened. She felt it, his yaki, her master's yaki. She rose roaring and sent her most powerful attacks where she felt his yaki coming from unknown location. Nudo felt her yaki coming from the seal and grinned. He sent a powerful beam at the seal, corroding it and destroying it. Then a bright flash of red light appeared as the QB's powerful yaki was felt. He smirked, taking a few steps back from the light. A female figure appeared kneeling down. Once the light disappeared, he smirked. He looked down at her. Welcome back to the world of the living, Kurarama, he said as he looked at a pair of identical blood-red slitted eyes. Unknown location. It had been so long, so many years since he last saw her. Kurarama, or QB no Kitsun, the strongest of the nine and his second in command. He looked at her. Her appearance was still the same, blood-red slitted eyes almost identical to his, with a look of mischievousness, adoration and a hint of lust behind them. Flowing crimson hair that reached her waist, the heart-shaped face with a huge grin upon looking at him, and Hera's figure with F-cup free and a bubblegum rear. She was wearing clothes of the old period, a black free plate with red lining with identical gauntlets. She wore black leather pants with black metal boots of red lining. Her trusty long sword Kitsun Nebi was hanging from her waist. It had a pure black handle with a red ruby at the palal. The hilt was wrapped in red cloth mixed with iron wire. It had a cross guard with spiked edges well hidden from her pitch black sheath with an IR-tailed red Kitsun depiction. The blade was blood red with orange glowing kangi running along. He made a gesture for her to rise. Don't be so formal, he said. As soon as he said that, she instantly appeared in front of him, wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed her deeply. He smiled in the kiss and returned the favor. She moaned, having longed for his touch for so long. The kiss lasted for about 5 minutes before Kurarama had to catch her breath. She panted with a smile. He smirked. Yup, you are still weak. And you have work to do, he said as she nodded. She kneeled down waiting for his command. He licked his lips for a second, savoring the taste of her mouth, then spoke. You are to start releasing all your brothers and sisters. I suggest starting from the AB and go all the way to the Habi. That way, if your own yaki isn't strong enough to break a seal, your siblings shall help you, he said. She nodded as he continued. I shall be at the Yakai Academy the moment you collect them all. Go to it, but stay outside unless you feel my actual yaki released and not my pressure or killer intent. Do not enter, that is all, he said. She nodded. Your wish is my command, she said, rising. However, he held her and pushed her down, wrapping his arms around her. As I said, you're still a bit weak from fatigue. Sleep for tonight and you shall leave tomorrow, he said as he used a spell on her, making her fall asleep. He sighed D with her all the night then left in the morning leaving her a note. Yakai Academy Nudo had arrived with teleportation into his dorm before school started. Getting a report from his clone, he sighed, glad nothing mind-blowing happened. I also like the articles you wrote, but you're me so it's expected, he said as the clone snickered. Dismissed, he said, and the clone saluted him, disappearing in a red mist. He looked at the side of his bed, seeing a sai not Sinu in its black sheath. He picked it up and sat in a yoga stance, the blade between his legs. He closed his eyes, getting inside his mindscape. Doritos Mindscape. He opened his eyes, having not entered his mindscape in a long time. He was in a forest clearing covered by snow. The sky was black with a blood-red moon. The moon depicted 4 rings, the 3 innermost filled with 3 tamo each, 9 in total. He looked upon the biggest tree, an iron throne at its bottom. The throne had 2 wolves' heads on the arms of the throne. Above the throne a black mist started to form. It flew into the air, then dived in front of Naruto. It started to spin as a black wolf appeared. He was large, as tall as Naruto. He had claws the size of Naruto's own fingers, same as his harp teeth. Red streaks run along his obsidian black fur. His eyes were the same as Naruto's, only red linings similar to insomnia surrounded his eyes. All in all, he looked both ferocious and majestic. He nodded towards Naruto. It has been quite a while since you came here, Naruto, he said, his voice booming. Naruto returned the nod. Indeed it has, Sinu, he said. He approached the wolf and patted his head. The wolf smirking, a low growl was heard from it, then a small whine. When Nudo stopped, Naruto laughed. I assume you have questions for my plans, he said as the wolf nodded. The sly grin appeared on his face. Will you mate with the vampire and the succubus, he asked with Naruto shaking his head. Perverted wolf, the answer is once they are ready, maybe after the end of the school year, or if something makes me release my yaki, thus my instincts go haywire, but even in the second case only if they love me, he said as Sinu nodded. He then continued, when will you restart your rule, he asked as Naruto frowned. Next year. I want the Bigu to pass the summer getting back in shape, then at the start of the new year where I hear parents arrive I shall install my rule, he said. A small flame appeared in his eyes. Sinu knew that flame all too well. He won't do it like last time. He won't have his bee do the work. No, this time he will do it himself. I can't wait for the moment, he thought. Sinu nodded. That is all, he said as Naro nodded. I shall carry you to school. Be happy, you oversized plushie, he said, vanishing from the mindscape. Wit a grin. He did hear Sinu roar, who do you call a plushie, you bastard? Aai Academy. Nudo opened his eyes, snickering a bit at the angry wolf. He knew Sinu the most, with Sinu knowing him the most as well. That is why he trusted him the most. The fact he was created and was a representation of his swordsman's spirit helped here. He rose and slung the enormous blade behind his back. However, he decided to abandon his jacket, instead putting on some black armbands. He nodded at the mirror and exited his dorm. He walked at the stand the newspaper club used to distribute newspapers. Only Jin and Sukun were there. The Y both saw his sword and gulped, especially Jin, who had felt it. Naruto grinned, showing his fangs, then helped organize the newspapers. The girls came a few moments later with Moka and Kumu blushing upon seeing his sword and his muscles. Naruto shook his head, giving them newspapers. I know you like what you see, but work first, pleasure later, he said as their blushes increased, causing Toucan and Jin to snicker, though they shut their mouths when Nudo turned to them with narrowed eyes. Soon the students started gathering, with all the girls frowning over Naruto's new look and took their newspapers only from him. With Moka and Kumu glaring at its girl, he noticed a glare from the corner of his eyes and held back a snicker. In less than 10 minutes they had given their entire stock. Nudo was looking at the last newspaper, reading the article while the girls were cheering for a job well done. They were discussing about a celebration when Nudo turned to look behind him and saw a girl approaching. She had long purple hair and icy blue eyes. She was wearing a light brown skirt, a white sweatshirt with dark blue sleeves, and a yellow pendant. She was also wearing light and dark purple striped stockings, white shoes, and a belt tied to her left leg. She had a lollipop in her mouth. She approached him and said, "Are there any newspapers left?" He nodded, folding it and gave it to her. She smiled and looked at him. "So you're Naruto, __, you look cuter than I thought," she said. Naruto raised an eyebrow as she turned and waved Goodbye do Moka grabbed him. What was that Naruto underscore underscore, she asked as he shrugged with Kumu frowning. I don't like her, she said. Naruto no need to think too hard, Leiden get school over with and then you can focus on this little celebration, he suggested as their eyes widened and jumped in the air. Shish. Outing in happiness. Nudo was sitting in the class watching the clouds passing by from the window as Shizuka was counting the students. Then the door opened and the girl came as Nutke interest rose. She walked and sat down a few seats in front of him with Shizuka squealing as Shirayuki Sinu came, she said. With a girl nodding, she turned to the class. Everyone, this is Shirayuki Miser. Due to some reasons she was unable of coming to the class. Please welcome her, she said as everyone turned to look at her. Naruto simply sensed her. Yaki then went back to his cloud watching, not deeming her a threat. I wonder wh. At Kurama is doing, he thought. Bezer Dai Kama said maniacally, firing bolts of yi rapidly to every lizard man she could find. This was a technique she invented herself, so good that in fact it piqued even Naruto's interest. She concentrated yaki into her palmar finger and fired it off like a gun. Beck. Oz of the strength of each shot. The technique was called Yaki Cannon. It was in fact so strong that each spot a lizardman got hit exploded in a shower of flesh and blood with a wound also getting burned. Ha, I haven't spilled blood in a while, give it to me, she yelled as one shot tore a lizard man's HEA. Off. She suddenly sneezed as one shot was thrown off track and hit the ground, an enormous pile of sand rising. She smiled. Naruto underscore underscore must be thinking of me, I must do better, she thought as she coated her hands in chakra, her nails turning to claws. She rushed and started tearing lizardman left and r. At the AAI Academy. Naruto listened to the girls' plans for the party. He nodded. All right, we shall meet after school, he said as they nodded. Suddenly Kumu started rubbing her FS on his chest. Be ready for my sweets, she said as Moka growled and grabbed her, leading her away. He shook his head with a SMIR. K then turned to a column. What is it, Miser, he asked as he heard a yelp. Wiser came out with a smile. Hello, she said approaching him. She took out his newspaper. I readed your articles are as interesting as always, she said with Nudo smiling. Why thank you, he said. She gave him a scrapbook. I asked Nekom Sen. Say to send me each newspaper in my time of absence. I filled all your articles in the scrapbook. I even wrote some comments, she said with Nudo opening. His eyes started twitching reading the rather unique comments. He closed the scrapbook and gave it to her. She placed it back. I love your articles, Yuji. I've everyone's opinion, even the weak, which I can relate to, she said as Naruto sighed, scratching his head. It is nothing really, he said as she suddenly wrapped her arm around his. He raised an eyebrow. You are lonely, right? I know how it feels. After all, we think the same, she said with a smile. Naruto Fina. LLY understanding where this was going, teleported away with her in tow. Cliff. They reappeared at the edge of a cliff with Red Sea below. Miser looked around surprised, then looked at Naruto. He crossed his arms. What do you mean I am alone, he asked as she tilted her head. We think the same, you are alone. So am I, she explained as Naruto shook his head. I am not alone, he said with Miser frowning. Is it because of Moka Akash, she asked as an icy mist started forming. He raised an eyebrow as she continued. I can't stand her. If you were to go to her, I don't know what I would do. You should be mine, she said. Nah. Ro jumped back, escaping the mist that started surrounding him. Suddenly Miser's hair turned to ice, so did her hands. She walked, ice forming around her. I am a Yukana. I have complete control over ice. Give up, Naruto underscore underscore. We are meant to be together, she said, attempting to freeze him. However, to her shock, the ice started melting as Naruto had one arm on his hip. He said, you are wrong, we are not the same, he said as her eyes widened. Don't tell me you are rejecting me, Naruto, she yelled as a blizzard formed. However, Nudo released a heat wave melting all the ice. She growled as she formed 5 ice puppets. Nudo's imply sent a wave of pressure that forced her to her knees and destroyed all puppets. He approached her, raising her chin. It isn't that I don't understand you, it is that we do not think alike. I do not mind you loving me, but you should try being yourself and respecting the fact you're unique. Don't try to find or force your way of thinking to someone, he said, rising and turning. He stopped coming to the newspaper club. We can start off as friends from there and in the future, who knows, he said, continuing his way, leaving Miser to think. Yakai Academy. Naruto, Moka, Kurumu, Yukari, Jin and Shizuka were city Around a table preparing for the newspaper club party. Suddenly the door opened and inside came Miser, her hair cut short. Naruto smirked and rose. Everyone welcome our newest member Miser, he said as the rest of the room waved, albeit the girls reluctantly. She nodded with a small smile with JY Aproak. Her, wow, what a beautiful girl, he said smiling. She frowned and huffed. I belong only to Nudo, she said with Jin falling to the ground as Kumu and Moka glared at her with Miser glaring back. Yukari saw the photos Jin carried and started beating him up while Shizuka tried to calm everyone down. NT Sukun sighed holding his forehead while Nudo started sniffing a piece of the cake. Everyone stared at him as he turned to Kumu. You put love potion inside, he asked as she widened her eyes. How, she asked with him touching his the nose. Nos, he replied. Moka and Miser growled and started fighting with Kumu as Naruto turned to Sukun. I forgot to ask you, will you attend the tournament, he asked as their ears perked up. Sukun lost all color in his face then laughed awkwardly. And fight against you, Naruto-san? No way, he said. Miser tiled her head. When is this tournament, she asked as Naruto smirked too. Maro, he said as the girls widened their eyes. They suddenly formed a circle and whispered. The rest of the room sweat dropping. Naruto Fasum, they will do something really dumb, he thought. Next day, today was the day of the tournament. 40 students gathered in the stadium for fighting events aiming for the title of champion of Yakai Academy. The tournament lasted from the morning till the afternoon with students observing from the stands and cheering for whoever they wanted to win. Moka, Yukari, Kumu and Miser were each wearing a shirt saying Go Naruto. However, it seemed they weren't the only ones who cheered for him. Tamao and the swimming club had made a large banner saying Nudo is the best, to the boys' envy of Nut's popularity. Some even thought of battling Nudo, that is until he reached first place. Each match he simply flicked his opponents and sent them to the wall unconscious on the final match. Just to give a show, he jabbed one in the stomach sending him flying to the air. He would have died if Naro didn't catch him before he crashed into the ground as he got crowned champion of Yakai Academy. There were 3 prizes, won 50,000 gold coins, 3 days off school for him and his club. 3. The ability to skip one of 4 questions in the final exams. Nudo, being the good guy he is, took the second prize to the happiness of his friends. When they asked when they would take it, he said soon. Next day, Nudo was drinking his coffee in the rooftop when he felt Moka approaching. He turned to and nodded as she smiled. Naruto, I want to ask you something, she said with a blush. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She looked down. Could you come to my dorm later today? I would like your help with studying, she said as he looked at her for a moment then nodded. Sure, though I am not certain what kind of help you would need, he said. She squealed and glommed him. Thank you, she said then smiled. Can I have your blood, she asked as he showed his neck with a smile. She bit on him, instantly moaning at the sweet taste of his blood. She unconsciously started rubbing herself on him. Is blood starting to become an aphrodisiac? He held back a soft groan as his instincts were starting to get the better of him. He pushed them down long enough for her to finish. She licked the leftover blood then smiled and hugged him. She then left the room not noticing Nutke amused smile. He sighed, turning back to the view. He thought about what she said. Homework help my ass, I wonder what she wants. Then he heard a voice in her head. Probably wants to bang you, said Sinu. Is Naruto Hoff, this is Moka not Kurumu. The best chances of you being relatively right is if she asks to be my mate, he said with Sen. You cackling. Oh, trust me, I will be right. Relatively or not, I will be right, he replied before going back to Sil. Nudo thought about it then shook his head. He would find out soon enough. Loa's dorm Loka was anxious about Nutke arrival. She had done all the preparations. She cleaned her dorm, brushed her teeth, bathed and wore her extra uniform that one was brand new. She also placed a faint touch of perfume on her. She was fidgeting inside a room until she heard a knock on the door. She rushed opening it. There stood Naruto looking exactly like today, only cleaner, and he was wearing his jacket. May I come in, he asked as she nodded with a smile. He entered observing Moka's dorm. Everything was tidy, clean and perfectly organized. She sat in her chair as Naruto sat in the bed. They started going over Moka's homework. Naruto laughed inside his head at Moka's attempts to write fake answers. After a while he turned To her Moka, I think you know I am not stupid enough to not see you purposely wrote fake answers. What is it that you wanted to say? He asked, turning fully to her. She blushed, looking at the ground. I am how to say it. She was interrupted as Nudo kissed her on the lips. She widened her eyes for EU seconds, then closed them, returning the kiss. Harrows her, then brought her down on his lap, causing her to moan. The kiss continued for a minute before Moka had to catch her breath. He looked at her with a smile. I love you too, he said as she squealed and kissed him. They continued for minutes upon minutes. Then as it had gotten late, Nudo was about to leave, but Moka held his arm. Please stay, she said with a puppy look. Barrow sighed. You need to sleep, he said. She nodded. Then sleep with me, she said, an enormous blush on her face. He shook his head with a smile, then leaned in the bed as she did so as well. He wrapped his arm around her as she leaned on him. She closed her eyes with a smile, falling asleep. He simply stayed awake all night, thinking about the future. Next day, the following morning, Nudo woke up Moka with a kiss on the forehead. She yawned, rising, then remembered last night's events with a blush. Naruto turned to her as he was putting on his boots. You should visit the bathroom. School starts in 20 minutes, he said as she yelped. She instantly went to the bathroom as Naruto packed up her things. Once she came out, he gave her her bag and placed his sword on his back. He zipped his jacket. We have CL obsession first, he said as she nodded. However, her stomach growled and she blushed. He smiled as he showed her his neck. She bit on it, feeding herself. After getting her fill, they went to class together with Moka holding his arm. The moment they entered, Kurumu and Miser both sent death glares to Moka. Understanding what happened, they both sat down as Shizuka started. Guess what everyone, I have great news, she said, getting raised eyebrows. In 2 days each club shall go on a training trip. The newspaper club was allowed to go to the human world, she exclaimed, getting gasps from most of them. With Tukun SWE aiding, he rose his arm. Are you sure this is a good idea, sensei, he asked as she nodded. Of course, I think, she added with Tukun banging his head on the desk. Moka looked scared and turned to Naruto. He whispered in her ear, don't worry, all would be fine, he said, though his mind was working overtime. The human world, it has been a century since I visited it. I wonder how it looks, he thought. Today was the day that the newspaper club would go to the human world. Nudo was waiting outside the bus, leaning on its hood while twirling around a stick he found on the ground. He was whistling an eerie tune. It made the bus driver feel scared, while Shizuka didn't even get its dreadful feeling, only liking the fact he could whistle. He had changed his attire. He still wore black jeans, only this time he wore black and red sneakers. He had a normal black belt with a silver buckle. He had a red shirt that was off and showing his black tank top with a weird eye on it. It was red with 4 rings and 9 tomo in the 3 innermost rings, 3 on each ring. He also had a silver watch on his left hand and a black leather bracelet with a silver plate on it on his right. Finally, around his neck was his necklace. His S word was missing, too noticeable in the modern world. Suddenly he turned and smiled as he saw Moka. She was wearing in a yellow sundress with a thin pink jacket above. She also had a brown suitcase. She smiled in return, then blushed at his look. She looked down at her clothes. Are my clothes weird, she asked. To which Naro shook his head. You look fantastic, he said as she smiled. She leaned on him as he wrapped his arms around her. Haro, you remember that I told you I was in a human school once, she asked, to which he nodded. I am a bit nervous of reliving those memories, she exclaimed, to which he arted, rubbing her head affectionately. Don't worry, we are here to have fun. I won't allow any sadness on this trip, he said, to which she sighed happily. She turned and gave him a kiss, to which he returned. However, they soon had to stop as Naruto caught an ice kunai. They turned, seeing Kurumu and Miser looking pissed and Yukari looking jealous. Kumu approached them. What is this, she yelled, to which Nudo shrugged. What, can't I kiss my mate, he asked, to which the girls widened their eyes and Moka looked at the ground embarrassed. At this moment Sukun arrived. Feeling the tension, Kurumu marched on Moka. How dare you steal my destined one, she growled as Naruto coughed. You know I can take multiple mates, he said as silence fell. The girls blinked, then enormous blushes appeared on their faces. What, they exclaimed. Naruto rose from the hood of the bus as he made his way to the entrance. Strong monsters have The ability to take multiple mates instead of fighting for my attention, I suggest attempting to gain it, he explained. Now come on, time for a trip. He finished jumping inside. The girls looked at each other then nodded, communicating as if they were telepathic. All three entered the bus together with Yuka, Ri and Sukun looking at each other with a sigh. They jumped on the bus as well. Naruto took a seat alongside Moka. Kumu and Miser sat behind them while Yukari and Sukun in front. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Where's Jin? He asked as Kumu smirked. He isn't done with his remedial tests, she said with Yukari. Looked at her. You want to talk, she said with Kumu faking being hurt. I finished on time, she said to her defense. More like you skipped class on time. Miser deadpan as everyone burst out laughing. Chizuka smiled and explained them how the trip would go and that they should have fun, to which everyone cheered. The trip so far had been rather uneventful. Naruto was looking outside the window with Moka's head leaning on his chest as he rubbed her back, causing her to sigh in happiness. Suddenly a flash of light surrounded them as they entered the human world. The girls looked in wonder seeing the large build. Ings and advanced technology. Sukun yelled, I am back, causing everyone to look at him. Boruto sighed, we know it's been a while since you visited the human world, but try to hold yourself, he said as Kumu raised an eyebrow. He has visited the human world, she asked as Sukun nodded. Yes, for holiday, he said, sweet tea dripping from his forehead. She nodded as they continued their journey in Peace Beach. They had arrived at the beach to relax and have some fun. Nudo wore the same swim shorts he wore in the pool. Moka wore a white swimsuit. Kumu wore a black bikini, while Miser wore a purple bikini with a top similar to a sports bra and the pants looking like shorts. Sukun wore green swim shorts while Yukari wore a yellow swimsuit with a skirt and her witch hat. They were on the shore playing with a yellow ball. Naruto slapped the ball towards Sukun, who bounced it off towards Miser. She hit it with the top of her fist. As Kumu jumped in the air and slammed it towards the ground. Moka skid it to the ground, hitting it towards Yukari. She went to slap it towards Naruto only for Kumu to hit it instead. To her anger, she turned to her. I challenge you, she said as the boy sighed. Kumu smirked. A lady always accepts a challenge, she said as both of them slapped the ball. Nutke way he used his head to headbutt it to the air as Moka hit it towards Miser. She slapped the ball into the air as Kumu jumped and sent it to the ground. Yukari skid it and sent it up as Moka sent it to her again. Then she took out her hand foreman. A large azure hand, striking the ball with power only for Naruto to catch it. He then started rubbing her head. No magic, he said as she whined. Meanwhile, Shizuka was enjoying a large plate of fish. Everything was great as the teens and centuries-old demon relaxed. An hour had passed as Nudo and Moka Ri sitting at the shore. Sukun and the others were playing inside the water. Suddenly Moka leaned her head in Nutke's shoulder as he wrapped an arm around her waist. They were about to kiss. Hey Naruto, come join us. Before they were interrupted by Kumu. Naruto sighed as Moka smiled. Go, you should Avenue. Lots of fun now that we're at the beach, she said as Naruto shook his head. A clone appeared and dived into the sea as they all started playing. Nudo turned back to Hera. We can be together and they can have fun, he said as she looked at him happily. She wrapped her fingers around his as he pulled her close, kissing her gently. She pushed her weight onto him as his back touched the ground with her sitting on top of him. They kept kissing for hours before Moka went to drink his blood. However, Kumu and Miser jumped at her, pushing her off Nudo. They started fighting with the clone separating them. Naruto to side, however, he suddenly looked up. He narrowed his eyes as everyone looked at sunflowers on the top of the hill. Nudo turned to the clone. Tell Shizuka we shall go for a walk, then dispel, he said as the clone nodded and disappeared. Naruto snapped his fingers as clothes appeared in a puff of smoke. He now wore a red tank top and black shorts along with red sandals. Moka put on a pink jacket. Miser put on a black open jacket while Kumu wore an open yellow shirt. Sukun wore a white t-shirt and Yukari a magenta hoodie. They walked as they observed the beautiful landscape around them. The sunflower field was massive. Sunflowers rose all the way the eye could see. Sukun sighed in content, smelling the nature surrounding them. However, the peace soon ended as Yukari and Kumu started fighting. When Yukari dropped a base into Kumu's head as they argued about Naruto, Sukun went between them. Now let's All get along, he said as they huffed and continued their way. No one except Nudo sensed a presence a few feet away. She wore a pink corset, a long black skirt with frills at the end, and purple highs. She had long brown hair kept in two ponytails and pink ka. She was holding a sunflower. That girl there is no mistake, I have to inform master, she thought, vanishing as soon as she did. Naruto smirked. Nighttime came as they prepared their shelter. Everyone was there except Nudo, who had gone for firewood, and Shizuka, who had gone for fish. Human world fish were too delicious to pass by, according to her. Yukari approached Sukun, who was holding a mobile fridge. Need help, she asked as he smiled. Thank you, but this is too heavy for you, he said as Kumu helped him. She then went to Moka, who was cutting carrots. Moka grinned at her. Thank you, Yukari-chan, but I can manage. We don't want you to cut yourself, do we? She asked rhetorically as Yukari sighed. She went inside the tent only to hear, kids will get in the way. Instantly leaving, she sat down at the shore watching the waves. I am not a kid, I can do many things, she exclaimed with a frown. Suddenly she felt a presence. Seeing a young woman, Yukari rose as the woman smiled. Calm down, little witch, she said as Yukari rose an eyebrow. How do you know I am one? To which the girl introduced herself. I am Ruby, too, a witch of this hill. I have been observing you since the morning. Glad I found another witch, she said, showing her own wand. Yukari let down her own. A pleasure to meet you, she said as Ruby smiled. Will you be my friend, Yukari-chan? She asked as Yukari nodded. She grinned, hugging her. They sat down talking about themselves. Suddenly Ruby changed subject. Humans attempt to destroy this field, that is why I shall destroy them, she exclaimed to Yukari. Surprise, Ruby T earned to her. You will help me, Yukari-chan, won't you? She asked as Yukari raised her arms. Hold on, I can't just, she started but was interrupted by Ruby. It is all right, preparations are finished. All that is needed is to complete the master's plan, she said, rising and outstretching her arm. What do you say, Yukari-chan? Shall we live here with the master? For she was about to finish but was interrupted. So this is where you were, Ao said. Both turned as Nudo appeared from the forest. Yukari smiled. None, she said as he smiled at her, then frowned towards Ruby, who had her wand pointing towards him. A pink glow oming from it. Suddenly dozens of plant beasts started swarming Naruto, attempting to bite him and crush him. Naruto huffed, then simply slapped the air as a large shock wave rocked the area, smashing all monsters. Ruby widened her eyes, then wings appeared from her back and flew into the air. She waved her W and at him. The monsters, now hundreds, as Yukari yelled at her to stop. Naruto growled enough and swung his arm with force, and as he instantly destroyed all of the plants. Yukari looked at Naruto, then narrowed her eyes as she chose what to do. Waving her wand at Ruby, she sent an energy blasted her that enter, falling back, stopping the fight effectively. Then the others came as Yukari fell to the ground panting. Yukari-chan yelled Kurumu as she miser and Sukun rushed at her. Gumu growled at her. Don't be so reckless, she said as Yukari smiled. I am fine, simply tired, she said with Tukun kneeling and pointing at his back. Instead, Yukari bowed towards Ruby. I am sorry, Ruby-san, I can't come with you, my friends are too important, she said to Ruby. Surprise, Yukari then walked away with the other three following. Loka rushed at Nudo, smiling. After you took a while to come, I got worried, she said as he held our shoulders. Why, I am fine, I won't ever leave you, he said as she smiled, her eyes filled with love. They went for a kiss until blood spurted everywhere. Moka widened her eyes in shock as a vine pierced Naruto's heart. Naruto simp looked down at it, an expressionless, almost dead look on his face. Moka wide Ned her eyes as the rest saw what happened. Ruby's wand was glowing. Yukari-chan shall come with me as my master desires, she yelled. Then Moka cried as an enormous wave of Yaki was unleashed. As inner Moka was released, Miser turned into her true form as her eyes glowed blue. Kumu growled, how dare you, as her eyes glowed pink and she also turned to her true form. The wave of Yaki was too much for Ruby as she could only look in surprise before she was enveloped in a flash of Yaki dent. Ruby woke up looking at an alive Nudo and the rest of the people in their normal forms looking at her. She turned to I am, how are you still alive, she asked, to which he smirked. Vines are too weak to pierce the railing, you only pierced a clone, he said as she frowned. Then why use a clone, she asked as he turned and gave Miser and Kumu a wink as they blushed for information. He said, then crossed his arms. Now tell me, why do You want to kill the humans, he said. She looked down. We did nothing wrong. Then the humans came and ruined everything. They smashed, crashed and burned, so I will kill them so they can. She was interrupted as Naruto threw a canid. She moaned, holding her bruised forehead. Heroes don't be an idiot. Filling hum. Ands because they destroy your land makes you the same as them. Inflicting pain on others. Every life matters, whether human or monster, he said as she widened her eyes. He then made a clone as he spawned his blade and placed it on his back. The clone grabbed her as the real Nudo opened the tent. Time to me. At this master of yours, he said to the shock of Ruby and the others. Church. The group walked towards the church, seeing a figure waiting outside. She had gray hair and wore a brown dress torn in several parts. She looked at them with red eyes. Welcome to your oblivion, she said. She turned to Ruby and Fro. Ned, so you betrayed me, she hissed with Nudo approaching. I forced her to lead me to you, he said as she turned to him. She smirked, sending a dozen plants at him. He punched the air as A for struck all the plants, crushing them instantly. She smirked. Oh, you're strong, huh? Well, I shall crush you and your fry. Ends instantly, she said as all the plant monsters in the entire ranch appeared. Suddenly they started to unite, forming 5 enormous monsters. They growled as the witch raised her arm to the sky. The humans came and destroyed everything, yet you yakai, you helped them by stopping me. You are a disgrace to a LL monsters, she said as Nutke eyes were hidden by his bangs. She raised her hand down. Die, you abomination, she yelled as the monsters surrounded him and prepared to skew him. The others widened their eyes, screaming his name. That the shock of everyone, an enormous force blasted from his body, destroying monsters, pushing back everyone. The ground crumbled, rocks broke, pebbles turned to dust. A black aura started rising from him as his eyes turned red with 4 rings and 9 tamo. His nails turned to claws, his teeth to fangs. The witch took a step back as her eyes widened. Arid grin. I think you're missed. Aiken, that is my line and it is meant for you, he said as he unshaved his blood, which is null. The witch took a step back. She looked at Nudo in pure fear. She knew those eyes, she knew them well. She only read ancient witch tomes and heard stories from her ancestors, some of them kids who had lived through that chaos, but she knew them. The eyes of the Alpha, the eyes of the king, the eyes of a god said to be possessed by the monster. No, the demon who had brought the world to its knees. Being before him centuries ago. The being not even the famous 3 dark lords could challenge. The being not even Allard O. R. Shinso, the most famous and strength vampires in existence, could fight. She growled at him. Impossible, you can't be him, she yelled at him, pure terror in her eyes. Naruto simply raised his sword to the sky as an enormous pillar of black fire rose from it. The black fire started to compress at the tip of the sword, forming a black fire orb the size of a pebble. The ground started to evaporate from the sheer heat. The same with Nito's clothes. Despite their durability, she took a step back. That small orb had enough power to kill her 10 times. She instantly started using her chance to form a dome covering her, a barrier to keep her alive. Every defensive spell, every powerful chant, every curse she knew, and all the magic plant monsters remains aided her. Soon a green dome was formed, made of wood and plants glowing a faint magenta. Naruto pointed his sword at her and said, Hell Cannon, as the orb blasted from sword towards her at amazing speeds. As soon as it touched the dome, it became an enormous stream of hellfire that consumed the entire dome. Screams could be heard as the fire instantly broke through the dome and burned the witch alive. When the attack was over, nothing was left. A giant scar was all was left, its ground scorched with fire still burning on it. In the center you could see a small dome of fire along with ash, the remains of the witch. With a snap of his fingers all the fire disappeared. Naruto then turned to the group. Yukari and Sukun looked at Naruto in amazement along with Sly. Fear, Moka, Kurumu and Miser looked at him with wonder and lust. He could also see Moka's Rario gem now turned into a slitted eye filled with need. Finally Ruby was at her knees looking at him. Lust, need, desire, weakness towards him, all those could be seen in his eyes. He approached her as she fidgeted at his terrifying gaze, his power surrounding him. He growled towards her. Bo, he said, his voice deep, filled with pure authority. She instantly did so, her head touching the ground. Who do you serve, he asked as she looked at him. Yaros-sama, she said as he growled again. From this day forth you're my slave. I If I say jump you ask how high, if I say kill you ask who, and w if I say pleasure you instantly begin. Is that understood, he asked as she nodded with a smile. Looking at him in happiness, he raised his arm and threw a tiny wave of yaki at her as she collapsed to the ground. His power receded as his eyes turned back to slitted blood red. He picked her up bridal style as he turned to them. I don't think we should be staying here for long, he said as all they could do was nod. Yakai Academy. One day had passed since the return of Naruto and his friends to Yakai Academy. Naruto suggested to Tenmei, in other words, forced with Tenmei's life on the line, that Ruby is given a job related to magic until he finished dealing with school, so Tenmei had her guard the tunnel Yakai Academy used to get to the human world from the human side. Naruto gave her a seal which would allow him to communicate with her along with teleporting her to his location. The first time he used more than his normal power, in other words use one tail worth of power. He was currently sitting at his dorm drinking vodka. He had to admit humans made interesting food and drinks, but was unable for him to get drunk, so he was easily able to gulp down large quantities without any fear. He smiled at its taste. It was a gift from Kumu. Suddenly he felt a presence in his room and turned. Seeing Kurarama, he raised an eyebrow all the while drinking vodka. What are you doing here, he asked from his chair while Kurarama lied down on the bed. Turning to Hi M with a smile, 7 of the B who are currently free. In a day or two Juki would be free, she replied. Well, he filled his glass again. I mean, why are you in my dorm, he asked as she can't I get a break to be with my master, she whined. Theo sighed, filling another glass and giving it to her. She gulped it down instantly, then her face became red. He raised an eyebrow as she started panting. He turned to the bottle only to widen his eyes. He cursed, damn succubus putting aphrodisiacs to my drink, he said as Kurum rose, a lustful look on her face. He placed the glass down as his iris became wider with high slits becoming narrower. Then again, I haven't had the chance of pleasure for a few centuries, he said as his muscles tensed. She grinned seductively as she jumped on his lap. Lemon happened 2 days later, the Rudo said in content, drinking his coffee. It was early in the morning, 1 hour before the start of school. He kept going with Kurama for hours until evening had arrived. Afterwards they slept together and she left the following morning. He spent the next 2 days relaxing, spending time with the girls, progressing with all 3 of them. He even went to check on Ruby to see what she was doing. He found out she had quite a bit of a master-servant complex as she asked if he was horny and needed to use her to calm his desires, witchier in her a spanking, though if he had to admit she seemed to enjoy it. Heck, he enjoyed it. That was the day he found out Ruby had a firm rear, but that was 2 days ago. Day was the day of school. He met up with T-Tukun as T-Tukun waved at him and he nodded in return. The walk to school was in silence as both of them seemed to enjoy the tranquility. He felt Sun's aura and nodded to himself. T-Sukun had trained the last 3 days. He felt that he was around the level of ADR Enk monster for a human. That was most impressive. I am pleased you are officially the strongest, pure human in existence, he said as Tukun blushed and said, thank you, I have mastered about 40% of what it could offer, he said, to which Naruto nodded. Then once you mastered it you will be near the strength of FAB rank monster. Quite good if I do say so myself, he said, earning a thankful nod from Tukun. The rest of the walk was in silence. As soon as they arrived at school they noticed Moka, Kurumu, Miser and Yukari handing out newspapers. He smiled as the girls waved at him. He waved back as he and T-Sukun street arted opening packets of newspapers. A large crowd had formed up and the need for newspapers had rose. Suddenly a pathway was opened as 5 people, 4 boys and 1 girl entered. They all wore black uniforms with white lining. The girl seemed to be the one who was leading them. She had long purple hair and purple eyes with an angular face full of arrogance. She wore a black miniskirt with a white belt along with a black Chinese-style shirt that left her stomach bare, revealing the bottom of her cup, freest and black shoes. She smirked. What is going on here, she asked as Moka approached her with a smile holding a newspaper. Hi, we are the newspaper club, please check our articles, she said, giving her a newspaper. The woman took it, reading it. She smirked before ripping it to pieces. To the shocks of the girls she snapped her fingers. What is this? This newspaper doesn't work according to school, she Said before one of the men kicked down their stand, however it was the last thing he did before he was jabbed in the forehead and sent crashing into a tree courtesy of Naruto. Two men fell into fighting stances next to the woman as the last charged at Nudo only to get hit by the end of an Inaka coming from Tukun. Naruto slowly walked forward as the two men charged at him together only for him to jab both of their chins at the same time, sending them flying into the air. They crashed a few feet away, both unconscious. He turned towards the girl. Who are you? He asked. She frowned. My name is Kido, champ of Yakai Academy, and I am telling you, you and your group are in deep trouble now, she said before leaving. Naro narrowed his eyes as the students started leaving. Kumu started sobbing, looking at their ruined stand as Moka held her. Nudo clenched his fist, then turned to Tukun. Tell Jen to come to the club room in 5 minutes or I will cut off both of his arms permanently, he growled as Tukun gulped and rushed off to get him. They all gathered to the club room with a sweating Jin and Sukun inside. Naruto was leaning at the wall, his arms crossed to his Kido. He asked as Jin widened his eyes. He looked down. And she is an officer of the Public Safety Commission, he said as Naruto narrowed his eyes. What is that? He demanded. Jin sighed and started explaining. They are a violent version of a student police, a militant group created to ensure the school is at peace by crashing all evil activities. That is the SCH. Police force, the Public Safety Commission, he said. Kumu banged her hand on the table. But they do no good, they just attacked our stand, she protested as Jin continued. Their power has made them corrupt. They are nothing like the force when the school was first working. They now get money and tribute from students or clubs who don't want to be in their sights, he explained, with Moka looking sad. To think something so bad is happening at school, she said. This recent event may be the reason why we are now to their sights, he said as Tukun protested. Wait, if they are doing evil activities then we muse write about them. Kuruma rose, nodding. That's right, we shall write bad articles about them, she said as JY Rose burn them. No room for anything else, he said as everyone looked at him. Miser stood up. Why, she asked as Jin made his way to the door. This is an official decision of the club, he said before he felt dread. Turning, he saw Nuda looking at him, his eyes cold. Jin, dear, hiding something? Tell me or I shall force you to tell me, he said as Jin's eyebrow was filled with sweat. What do you mean, he asked as Naruto released a small amount of power. Jin stumbling back, betting the meaning. He sat back down. Eve R wondered why I am the only senior member of the newspaper club, he asked as they nodded back. To my first year an event occurred regarding the Public Safety Commission, so we wrote articles regarding them. The result, they destroyed our club with violence, he muttered as the girls looked at him in shock. That is why we can't do anything, he said as Naruto pushed himself off the wall. Everyone looked at him as he was frowning. After a few moments he nodded. I shall go find Kido, he said as Jin rose. Usurka AK, he yelled as Naruto flicked him away. He rushed outside. The others, thinking about all they learned behind the academy, sat Kido with a group of students. She was giving them orders when the students fell asleep. She narrowed her eyes, jumping back. She turned as Naruto walked towards her. She frowned for a second, then smirked, placing an arm at her hip. Well, if it isn't Nudo the champion, she said sarcastically as Naruto crossed his arms. Tell me who your leader is, he said as she looked at him. What, feel like joining us, she asked as he shook his head. No, to force him to stop the Public Safety Commission's harassment, he said as she laughed loudly. She looked at him with a crazed look in her eyes. Yes, prepared to die, she said suddenly to narc interest. Her stomach split apart, revealing 8 black and yellow striped legs. She smirked. I am Major Gumo, she said, sending a string of web from her mouth. Naruto raised his arm as it was glued to his wrist, then with a small tug she was instantly sent flying towards him. As he grabbed her neck she squirmed in pain as he looked at her, releasing his power as if she cowered in fear. Name, he said. Kyo, she breathed out as he nodded. Thank you, he said. He was about to finish her. Just so you know, your leader will be defeated and you will have a front row seat, he said before chopping her neck. As she fell unconscious he formed a clone and had her delivered to the infirmary. He then took out a piece of paper and wrote something. With a nod to himself he left the queue. The tall lean man with long blonde hair and gold eyes, wearing the Public Safety Commission's uniform, Was sitting inside an office dealing with paperwork. Suddenly 3 people rushed in, 2 men and 1 woman. The did with a gulp placed down a box in his table. He raised an eyebrow, opening it before his eyes were filled with anger. Inside were the head of the 4 members of Kito's squad. There was also a piece of paper. He took it, reading it. Greetings, you must be Kyo. This is a warning. Stand down, leave the newspaper club alone and start having the Public Safety Commission do good for once. If you do not, I will find you and have you join them in the same manner. Signed, Naro, the champion of Yakai Academy. Hall looked angry before a smirk fell on his face. He chuckled lightly to the confusion of the 3 other occupants before he burned the paper. His eyes held a crazed look. So you want to go against me, Naruto? Well, I shall personally ensure you and your club become history, he said as a small golden aura with a blue outline surrounded his body for a moment. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So quickly like this video for second part of the series and comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go bye.